The late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the manicured lawns of the Hillside Shooting Club, a place where wealth and arrogance seemed to weigh heavier than the rifles carried inside. Expensive cars lined the parking lot, sleek black SUVs, sports cars polished to mirrorshine, and a few classic convertibles whose owners wanted to be noticed. This was not the kind of place ordinary people came to practice. Here, money bought access, prestige bought attention, and names carried more weight than skill. Walking through the tall iron gates was Emma Miller, a woman who looked entirely out of place among the polished boots and tailored shooting jackets. She wore simple jeans, an old flannel shirt, and sturdy boots that had seen better days. There was no brand-name gear hanging from her shoulders, no flashy gun case in her hand. All she carried was a plain, well-worn rifle case, its surface scratched, its leather handle faded from years of use. Most people at the club didn't even glance her way. Those who did smirked and turned back to their conversations, assuming she was lost or perhaps delivering something for someone more important. But Emma kept walking, her steps steady and her eyes forward. Inside the main hall, voices filled the air, wealthy men and women laughing loudly, boasting about their latest scores, their rifles, their hunting trips abroad. At the center of attention stood Blake Radcliffe, the reigning club champion. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the smug confidence of someone who had never been told no. His custom-made rifle gleamed under the overhead lights, and every word he spoke was followed by exaggerated laughter from those around him. Emma quietly stepped into the range, setting her case on an empty bench. The room's energy shifted slightly, not out of respect, but curiosity. A few of the members frowned, whispering under their breath. "What's she doing here?" one man muttered. "Probably lost," another chuckled. "Looks like she pulled that rifle out of a garage sale." Blake glanced over, his smirk widening. Well. Looks like the neighborhood has let in the tourists," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The group erupted in laughter. Emma didn't respond. She simply unzipped the old case, carefully revealing a rifle that, though aged, had been lovingly maintained. The wooden stock bore the marks of years of handling, and the metal shone faintly, polished by countless hours of care. She ran her fingers along the barrel, her expression calm, almost reverent. In her mind, she could still hear Nathan's voice, her late husband, a Navy SEAL sniper whose steady hand and patient teaching had once guided her through nights at the range. "It's not the gun that makes the shooter, Em. It's the discipline. The stillness. The breath you take before the trigger pulls." The memory tightened her chest, but she steadied herself. She wasn't here for attention, nor to prove anything to these wealthy strangers. She was here because Nathan's memory lived in every shot she took. Blake sauntered closer, twirling his expensive ear protectors in his hand. "You know, sweetheart," he drawled, "this isn't the kind of place where just anyone can walk in and play soldier. These rifles aren't toys. Maybe you should head back to the knitting club, yeah?" The crowd chuckled again, watching Emma for a reaction. But she only adjusted her stance and loaded her rifle. Her silence unsettled Blake more than if she had snapped back. At the far end of the range, targets waited, black and white circles mounted on polished frames. Blake's name was already written across several record boards, each number standing as proof of his dominance. Emma exhaled slowly. She hadn't planned to draw attention, but she could feel every eye on her now, waiting for her to fail. She tightened her grip, aligned her sights, and whispered under her breath, "For you, Nathan." The club went quiet as she raised the rifle. It was the calm before the storm, the moment when an invisible woman was about to shake an entire world that thought she didn't belong. The echo of Emma's rifle case settling on the bench still lingered in the range when Blake Radcliffe decided to make her his entertainment for the evening. He leaned casually against the counter, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, spreading his arms like a showman, "it seems we have ourselves a guest star today. A brave little lady who thinks she can shoot with the big boys." Laughter rippled across the polished hall. A few of the men smirked, some of the women exchanged amused glances. One older member muttered, "This will be over before it begins." Emma ignored the chatter, focusing on aligning her sights. She had no intention of performing for these people. Her goal was simple: practice, breathe, remember Nathan. Yet the noise around her pressed like a weight. Blake wasn't finished. "Tell you what," he said, pacing closer. His expensive shooting jacket gleamed under the lights, stitched with the club's crest. "Why don't we make this interesting? I'll let you take a shot. If you land anywhere on the target, we'll clap politely, and you can go home happy. But if you miss, well, maybe you stick to, I don't know, Sudoku or gardening." The crowd chuckled again. Emma lowered her rifle slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in quiet calculation. She wasn't one to rise to taunts. Nathan had taught her that ego was a shooter's greatest weakness. Still, she could feel her heartbeat, steady and purposeful, telling her this was a moment she couldn't walk away from. "I didn't come here for games," she said softly. Her voice was calm, measured, but it carried enough strength that the laughter faltered. Blake grinned, mistaking her composure for nerves. "Oh, come on now. It'll be fun. Let's make it fair. One shot each. If, by some miracle, you outshoot me," he paused dramatically, drawing more attention, "I'll buy your membership here for the year. Free of charge. But if I win, you admit publicly that you don't belong and never step foot in this club again." The members perked up at the wager. This was better than television, drama unfolding live. A few even pulled out their phones, ready to capture what they thought would be Emma's humiliation. Emma hesitated. It wasn't the bet that made her pause, but the gravity of what it meant. She had stepped into this place as an outsider, invisible, just another face. Accepting the challenge would put her in the spotlight, something she had never sought. But then she remembered Nathan's words, "Never let anyone decide your worth, Em. You know who you are." Her grip on the rifle tightened. She lifted her chin, meeting Blake's smug gaze. "Fine," she said quietly. "One shot." Gasps and murmurs ran through the room. The crowd gathered closer, eager to witness the spectacle. The range attendant quickly set two fresh targets at equal distances, side by side. The spotlight mounted on the ceiling clicked on, bathing the range in stark brightness. Blake stepped forward first, raising his gleaming, customized rifle. He moved with the arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. His supporters clapped him on the back, whispering encouragement. He lined up his shot, inhaled, and fired. The crack echoed through the hall. His bullet struck near the center, just shy of perfect. Applause erupted. Blake smirked, bowing slightly as if he had already won. Then it was Emma's turn. The whispers grew louder. "She'll miss completely. Look at that old rifle, no way it can match his. This will be embarrassing." Emma blocked out the voices. She placed the rifle against her shoulder, her movements calm, deliberate. The weight of the wood felt familiar, almost comforting. She inhaled deeply, recalling the rhythm Nathan had drilled into her: breathe in, breathe out, hold, squeeze. For a moment, the world shrank. The laughter, the whispers, the arrogance, all of it fell away until there was only her, the rifle, and the target waiting at the far end. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, ringing louder in the silence that followed. The bullet tore through the target with surgical precision, dead center, perfectly splitting Blake's record. The room froze. Mouths hung open. The laughter died in throats. Even Blake blinked, his smirk faltering as he stared at the scoreboard in disbelief. Emma lowered her rifle, exhaling slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped back, her eyes calm, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But everyone else knew, something extraordinary had just begun. The silence after Emma's shot stretched across the hall like a held breath. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint settling of her rifle on the bench and the echoes still humming in the rafters. Then the scoreboard updated with a faint beep, confirming what the naked eye had already seen, a perfect center hit. Gasps erupted. The spectators leaned forward, squinting at the target through the long glass window at the far end of the range. The neat, clean hole sat exactly at the bullseye's heart, so precise it looked as though it had been drawn there. "She broke it," someone whispered. "No way, that's Blake's record score," another muttered, disbelief thick in his voice. Blake's smirk faltered, then returned, weaker this time. He laughed loudly, trying to mask the tightness in his jaw. "Beginner's luck," he declared. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." But his voice lacked its earlier ease. He adjusted his cuffs, glancing nervously at the murmuring crowd. For the first time, the attention wasn't fully his. It was shifting, to her. To the quiet woman with the old rifle who had walked in unnoticed and just shattered his untouchable status. Emma said nothing. She carefully reloaded, her hand steady, her expression unreadable. Inside, though, her chest rose with a quiet storm of emotions. She hadn't come here to humiliate anyone. She hadn't come here to prove herself. She'd only wanted to practice, to keep alive the lessons Nathan had left her. And yet, here she was, standing at the center of a battlefield she hadn't chosen. The range attendant, usually bored and detached, looked stunned. That's the cleanest bullseye we've seen this season," he murmured, shaking his head. The members who had mocked her earlier now whispered in a different tone, one of curiosity and awe. "Who taught her to shoot like that?" "That rifle, look at it. Old, but steady. She knows exactly what she's doing. She can't really be that good, can she?" Blake felt the shift in the room like a punch to the gut. His pride, polished, displayed, worshipped in this club, was cracking. He stepped forward, plastering on his winning smile. "All right," he said, louder than necessary, "so you had one good shot. But shooting isn't about luck, is it? It's about consistency. Anyone can fire once. But champions prove themselves over and over." He turned to the crowd, feeding off their attention. "So, what do you say? A proper competition. A series of shots. Let's see if our guest here can keep up with someone who's been doing this his whole life." The room buzzed with excitement. The members loved drama, and this was better than any tournament they had planned. Emma looked up, her calm gaze meeting his. For a second, Blake faltered under that stillness. She didn't glare, didn't sneer, she simply regarded him with quiet patience, as if she had already seen through the act. "I didn't come here for a contest," Emma said, her voice low but steady. "I came here to shoot." "Then shoot against me," Blake snapped, his tone sharp, the mask slipping. "Unless you're afraid that was the only good shot you've got." The challenge hung in the air. All eyes turned back to her. Some expected her to back down, to quietly pack her case and leave. After all, she was just a simple woman, a widow, a stranger in their world of polished rifles and prideful traditions. But Emma remembered Nathan's words, etched in her memory from long nights on makeshift ranges: "The target doesn't care who you are, Em. It doesn't care about your past, your name, or your fear. It only listens to your focus. One shot at a time." She set her jaw, sliding another round into the chamber. "Fine," she said. "We'll see." The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in gasps. The range attendant quickly began preparing the next set of targets, adjusting the distances, increasing the difficulty. This wasn't just practice anymore. This was a duel, pride, skill, and reputation on the line. Blake smiled again, though his eyes betrayed the edge of unease. He had demanded a challenge, but in the pit of his stomach, for the first time in years, he wondered if he had made a mistake. And Emma, calm and unwavering, lifted her rifle once more. The targets were reset, this time farther out. The new distance wasn't one that casual shooters attempted, it was meant for seasoned competitors who could read wind shifts and control nerves under pressure. The crowd, now gathered shoulder to shoulder, buzzed with anticipation. The club had never seen a scene like this, its reigning champion forced into a duel by a woman no one had taken seriously minutes earlier. Blake strutted to his lane with theatrical confidence, though his jaw worked as if he were grinding down unease. He adjusted his custom ear protection, slid a polished round into his rifle, and flashed his winning grin. "Watch closely," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is how a professional does it." He took his time, aiming with exaggerated care. When he fired, the crack split the silence, and the bullet struck near the bullseye, slightly off-center but still impressive. Applause rippled through the room, though less enthusiastic than before. The audience was no longer blinded by his swagger. They were waiting to see how Emma would respond. Emma approached her lane with none of his theatrics. She didn't boast or seek eyes on her. She simply checked the wind flags, adjusted her stance, and steadied her breath. She let her finger rest lightly on the trigger, hearing Nathan's voice again in her mind. "Don't rush the shot. Let the shot come to you." Her rifle cracked, sharp and clean. The bullet punched the target, just inside the dead center. "Perfect." The room gasped. Someone muttered, "Impossible, again?" Another whispered, "She's not just lucky. She's trained." Blake's smile thinned. He tried to laugh it off. "Well, one good shot doesn't make a champion. Let's see her keep it up." But a flicker of doubt darkened his eyes. Round after round, the competition escalated. Blake would fire, hitting close, sometimes brushing the bullseye. Then Emma would step up and quietly outdo him, her bullets carving tighter groups, her rhythm unshakable. By the fifth round, the whispers had shifted from skepticism to awe. "She's flawless. Where did she learn this? She's better than half the pros I've seen." Blake's frustration grew. He reloaded with jerky movements, muttering under his breath. Sweat dampened his brow despite the cool, climate-controlled room. Each time he landed a strong shot, Emma answered with one better, never dramatic, never boastful, just steady and true. The crowd, once his adoring audience, began leaning toward her. Their applause after his shots grew polite, but when Emma fired, the silence was reverent, followed by genuine astonishment when her bullet struck home. Blake couldn't stand it. Between rounds, he walked past Emma, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think this little stunt makes you somebody? You don't belong here. You're nothing but a housewife with a hand-me-down rifle." Emma didn't flinch. She simply looked at him, calm and steady, and said, "Maybe. But I don't need to belong to be better." The words cut deeper than any insult. For the first time, Blake's confidence wavered openly. He stepped back to his lane, jaw tight, movements sharper than before. His next shot went wide, still respectable by ordinary standards, but sloppy compared to his usual precision. The crowd murmured. Blake never missed like that. Emma lifted her rifle without hesitation. Her bullet landed dead center once more, as clean as a heartbeat. The room erupted, not with laughter or mockery this time, but with something rarer, respect. People who had ignored her when she first walked and now leaned forward, their eyes bright, their whispers urgent. "She's incredible. She's teaching him a lesson." Blake slammed his rifle onto the bench, his smile gone. His pride was unraveling, thread by thread. And still, Emma remained quiet, composed, her strength flowing not from arrogance but from purpose. She wasn't here to humiliate him. She wasn't here to win the crowd. Every bullet she fired was for Nathan, for the promise she had made, for the memory she carried. And that truth gave her a calm that Blake, with all his wealth and ego, could never buy. By the end of the round, one thing was clear: the rivalry had only just begun, but the tide was turning. And Blake Radcliffe, the untouchable champion of Hillside Shooting Club, was beginning to realize that for the first time in his career, he was fighting a battle he might not win. By now, the tension inside the Hillside Shooting Club was electric. What had started as a spectacle to mock an outsider had become a duel that no one could look away from. Emma, the quiet widow with her weathered rifle, had matched Blake Radcliffe, shot for shot, and more often than not, had surpassed him. The air buzzed with whispers. "She's unstoppable. Blake's losing his edge. Maybe she should be champion." Each murmur gnawed at Blake's pride. His jaw tightened, his smile forced. For years, his name had been the heart of this place, every plaque, every record board bore his mark. And now, in the space of an hour, this simple woman was dismantling his legacy. He couldn't allow it. During a break between rounds, as the targets were being reset, Blake sauntered past Emma's bench, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're good," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. "But let's see how you handle real competition." He waited until she stepped aside, stretching her arms, then leaned casually over her bench. With a practiced flick, he brushed his hand along the adjustment knob of her scope, ever so slightly twisting it out of alignment. The move was quick, subtle, hidden beneath the appearance of adjusting his gloves. To the crowd, it looked like nothing more than idle fidgeting. But to Blake, it was the advantage he needed. When Emma returned, she sensed something was different. She picked up her rifle and frowned, tilting her head. The scope's crosshairs didn't feel quite right, slightly off, just enough to disturb precision. She adjusted, tested her stance, but the subtle sabotage lingered. Nathan's voice echoed in her memory, "Trust yourself more than the tool. The rifle can lie, but your instincts won't." She exhaled slowly. If Blake thought a small trick would shake her, he had underestimated the years of training Nathan had poured into her. She had fired under worse conditions, winds whipping, rain pounding, heart heavy with grief. Compared to that, this was nothing. Blake went first in the new round, brimming with confidence. His bullet landed cleanly near the bullseye. The crowd applauded, though quieter than before. He turned, flashing his smile, waiting to see Emma falter. Emma lifted her rifle, ignoring the skewed crosshairs. She relied instead on the rhythm of her breathing, the way the rifle's weight rested against her shoulder, the subtle dance of wind tugging at the flag's downrange. She aimed not with the scope, but with memory, with instinct. She squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed. The bullet tore into the target, slightly off-center, but still within the bullseye. The crowd gasped. Whispers rippled through the hall. "She's still hitting? Even with that old rifle? Incredible." Blake's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected her to compensate so easily. The next round came. Again, he fired confidently, landing close to the center. Again, Emma fired, her shot kissing the bullseye's edge with uncanny precision. It became clear she had noticed the tampering, and instead of faltering, she had adapted. The sabotage had not broken her, it had revealed her resilience. Some of the club members began to murmur more boldly now. "Did you see him near her bench? Looked like he touched her rifle. Was that cheating?" Blake's ears burned as the whispers grew. He tried to drown them out with bravado. "See? She's slipping." "Couldn't hold the center," he boomed, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. Emma remained silent, focused. Every shot she fired now was not only a test of skill but of will. She was proving, to Blake, to the crowd, to herself, that her strength wasn't in the equipment or the acceptance of others. It was in the lessons she carried, the discipline etched into her soul. By the end of the sabotage round, the scoreboard told the story. Blake had a slight lead, but only because of Emma's adjusted shots, and even then, she was close enough to make the margin razor thin. The crowd was no longer cheering him. They were watching her. Respect gleamed in their eyes, admiration swelling for the woman who refused to break under unfair play. Blake, sensing the shift, clenched his fists. He had tried to sabotage her and failed. Worse, his trick had exposed his desperation. Emma laid her rifle gently on the bench, exhaling steadily. She said nothing, but in the silence of her calm, the truth was clear: she was stronger than his arrogance, sharper than his deceit. And Blake knew, deep down, that the final showdown would decide more than just a trophy. It would decide who truly deserved the title of champion. The tension in the Hillside Shooting Club had reached a fever pitch. What began as a casual demonstration had evolved into something much larger, a battle of pride, of skill, of truth. By now, even the most loyal Blake supporters had gone quiet, their eyes darting between him and Emma, uncertain of who would prevail. The referee, sensing the gravity of the moment, announced the final challenge. A moving target. Long distance. This will decide the champion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A moving target wasn't part of the usual exhibition, it was a test reserved for elite competitions, the kind that required split-second calculation and nerves of steel. Blake's grin returned, though it trembled slightly at the edges. Finally, he boomed, a real test. Let's see how our guest manages when luck isn't on her side. Emma simply nodded, her expression calm, though inside her chest, her heart thudded. This was the moment Nathan had prepared her for. She remembered the endless evenings on their land, the targets swaying from ropes in the wind, Nathan's steady voice guiding her, "Don't chase the target. Let it come to you. Anticipate, breathe, trust yourself." The target was set, a disc painted white with a red center, pulled along a line at nearly 50 yards, gliding smoothly back and forth. The room fell silent. Blake stepped forward first, his every move exaggerated for the crowd. He lifted his custom rifle, polished and gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He tracked the disc, his finger tightening, then released. Crack! The bullet punched the target's outer ring, respectable, though not flawless. The audience clapped politely. Blake bowed with a flourish, though his eyes flicked nervously toward Emma. Emma approached the line. Her rifle looked almost out of place next to Blake's precision machine, its wooden stock worn smooth from years of use. She lifted it slowly, her posture relaxed. She followed the disc, breathing evenly. Time seemed to slow. Don't chase the target. Let it come to you. She exhaled. Her fingers squeezed. Crack! The disc spun violently, the bullet hole clean through the red center. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, and whistles filled the room. People who had ignored her when she first walked in now shouted her name, slapping benches, pumping fists. Blake's face darkened. Beginner's luck, he growled. He set his jaw and raised his rifle again. The disc rolled back across the range. His shot rang out, this time closer, just brushing the inner red. A good hit. The crowd applauded, though less enthusiastically than before. Emma stepped forward again. The world narrowed. She didn't see the crowd or hear their noise. All she saw was the target, swaying gently, almost as if waiting for her. She felt the stock against her cheek, the breath leaving her lungs. Her second shot cracked. The disc jolted, another perfect center hit. The hall exploded with sound. Blake slammed his fist against the bench, his composure unraveling. "This isn't possible," he barked, but the words sounded weak, hollow. The referee raised his hand. Final round. Each shooter has one more attempt. The room hushed. Blake lifted his rifle, his hands trembling now despite his effort to mask it. He aimed, teeth grinding, sweat beading his brow. The disc rolled, steady and mocking. He fired. The shot struck wide, clipping the outer white edge. A miss, by champion standards. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stepped forward. Every eye was on her. Blake glared daggers, but his fury couldn't pierce her calm. She raised the rifle, steady as stone. Nathan's voice whispered again, "This shot isn't for the crowd. It isn't for the record. It's for you." She inhaled, exhaled, and squeezed. Crack! The disc shattered, splitting clean off its mount and tumbling to the floor. The bullet had torn straight through the center with such force and precision that the target itself could no longer hold. The room erupted into chaos. Cheers thundered, feet stomped, people shouted her name. Emma lowered her rifle gently, her face serene, her eyes glistening with quiet triumph. Blake stood frozen, his mouth open, pride broken before everyone. His title, his reputation, his arrogance, shattered as cleanly as the disc at Emma's feet. Emma didn't bow, didn't boast. She simply stepped back, whispering under her breath, "For you, Nathan." And in that moment, it was clear, the champion was no longer Blake Radcliffe. It was the woman they had underestimated, the one who had walked in alone and left carrying the respect of all. The cheers inside the Hillside Shooting Club echoed like thunder, rattling the very walls. For the first time in the club's long history, Blake Radcliffe was not the star, not the untouchable champion. Instead, all eyes were on the quiet woman with the weathered rifle, her face calm as if she hadn't just shattered the record and the target in one breathtaking shot. Emma lowered her rifle and stepped back from the firing line. She didn't bask in the applause or raise her arms in victory. Instead, she rested the rifle gently on the bench, treating it not like a weapon of conquest but like an old friend. The crowd surged forward, unable to contain their awe. "That was incredible," one man exclaimed. "The cleanest shot I've ever seen," another said. "Did you see how she shattered it? Not even Blake could do that." For years, these same people had ignored her, laughed at her arrival, dismissed her as a nobody. Yet now, their voices trembled with admiration, their gazes shining with respect. Blake, meanwhile, stood rooted in place, his face pale beneath the flush of anger. His fists clenched, but there was no salvaging his pride. He had fired and missed where she had destroyed the impossible. His legend had crumbled in a single afternoon. A younger club member, one who had once worshipped Blake, stepped forward, speaking loudly enough for all to hear. "Emma's not just better today. She's better, period. She deserves the champion's title." The crowd roared its agreement. Chants began, "Emma! Emma! Emma!" Blake spun toward them, his voice sharp and desperate. "This isn't fair. She's a newcomer. She hasn't earned her place here. One match doesn't erase years of competition." But his protest fell flat. The more he shouted, the smaller he seemed. The arrogance that once commanded attention now sounded like the whining of a child who had lost a game. The referee stepped forward, silencing the room with his raised hand. His voice carried with authority, the records speak for themselves. Emma not only broke the club's record but destroyed it. By every measure, she has proven herself worthy of the champion's title. Applause thundered again, louder than ever. Some even stamped their feet, the sound rolling through the floor like drumbeats. Emma blinked, overwhelmed. She hadn't come here to claim titles or crowns. She had only wanted to honor Nathan, to test herself against the world's noise and doubt. But now, standing in the spotlight she never sought, she realized this was more than her victory, it was a message. One of the older club members, his hands rough from years of shooting, stepped forward and tipped his cap. "Ma'am," he said, voice warm with sincerity, "I've been shooting for 40 years. I thought I'd seen the best there was. But you reminded us what true skill and discipline look like. Thank you." Emma's throat tightened. She nodded humbly, murmuring, "It wasn't just me. My husband taught me everything. This was his dream as much as mine." The crowd softened, many bowing their heads in respect. For the first time, Emma shared Nathan's memory with them, and it was as if the room itself honored him too. Blake, cornered by silence, tried one last jab. "Enjoy it while it lasts," he sneered. "This club has standards. You'll never belong here." But his words carried no weight. No one cheered him, no one defended him. Instead, one of the members, the same who had once idolized him, replied firmly, "Belonging isn't about wealth or swagger, Blake. It's about skill, respect, and honor. Emma has all three. You've lost them." Blake's face twisted, but he had no answer. He stormed out of the hall, the door slamming behind him, leaving his pride scattered in his wake. Emma stood quietly amid the applause. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. Instead, she placed her hand gently on her rifle's worn stock and whispered, unheard by the crowd, "We did it, Nathan." In that moment, she wasn't just a simple woman anymore. She was the champion who had earned the respect of all, and the symbol of what true perseverance could accomplish. The echoes of applause still lingered in the Hillside Shooting Club long after Blake's angry footsteps had faded. For the first time, the club's walls bore witness to something greater than competition, a reminder that greatness could come from humility, perseverance, and heart. Emma stood quietly by the bench, her rifle resting in its case now, the wormwood glinting faintly under the lights. The crowd had begun to thin, some members rushing off to tell others about what they had just seen, others lingering just to steal one more glance at her, as though afraid the moment might vanish if they looked away too soon. She didn't feel like a champion. Not in the way Blake had strutted and boasted. Instead, she felt peaceful. It wasn't the title that mattered, it was what it represented. One of the referees approached, holding out the brass plate reserved for the record board. "It's tradition," he said softly, "that the champion engraves their name themselves. Will you?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. She took the small engraving tool and, with a steady hand, carved her name beside the record she had shattered. The letters gleamed, etched forever into the history of the club, Emma Walker. A hush fell over those who remained, as if watching history being written. When she finished, Emma stepped back. She thought of Nathan, his laughter, his steady voice, his unwavering belief in her. Her chest ached, but it was not sorrow alone, it was pride, too. She had carried him with her, and now his lessons would live on in more than memory. As she turned to leave, the younger shooters rushed forward, their faces bright with excitement. "Will you teach us?" one asked eagerly. "How did you stay so calm?" another chimed in. Emma smiled softly. "It's not about the gun," she said. "It's about discipline, patience, and respect. If you learn that, the rest follows." They nodded eagerly, hanging on her every word. For them, she wasn't just a champion, she was a mentor, a living example of what they could become. Outside, the evening sun dipped low, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. Emma stepped into the fading light, breathing deeply. The air smelled of dust, gunpowder, and freedom. She walked slowly to her truck, the crowd's noise fading behind her. For a moment, she paused, resting her hand on the rifle case in the passenger seat. She whispered, "We did it, Nathan. Not for the trophy, not for them, for us." The wind seemed to answer, rustling the trees in gentle approval. Back inside the club, the stories of her shots were already growing into legend. Some swore the bullet had split the target clean in half. Others claimed she hadn't even needed the scope, that she had fired with pure instinct alone. Myths were forming, the kind that would be retold for years, maybe generations. But Emma didn't stay to hear them. She didn't need the noise. She had come to honor a promise, and she had kept it. As she drove away, the club behind her buzzed with new life. The members weren't talking about Blake anymore. They were talking about her, the woman who had walked in ignored and walked out immortal. Her name was now etched on the record board, but more importantly, it was etched in their respect. Emma smiled faintly as the road stretched before her. She knew she would return someday, not to prove herself, but to remind others, young, old, rich, poor, that true skill didn't come from arrogance or wealth. It came from heart, patience, and the courage to stand when others doubted you. And so, her legacy began, not as a woman who once broke a champion's record, but as the shooter who redefined what it meant to be a champion at all. The simple woman. The underestimated one. The widow who carried her husband's lessons into legend. The champion who needed no crown, because her shot had already made her immortal.